Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is how to understand the psychopathic mind control, just that mechanism. How is it that they get people so kind of psychologically hijacked? And I think this is particularly in reference to a female psychopath that is disturbing a gentleman. So I want to address that question. Because when we talk about someone who is psychopathic, it's not the stigma that you might think of from the movies or something of that nature, someone who might be violent, etc. We're not going to go down that road, but it's just what the stigma that is conjured up. But it's important to understand in the world out there, you need to be aware that there are different, psychological compositions of individuals, and some are what they call, antisocial personalities. They're otherwise known as intraspecies predators, Dr. Robert Hare. And these can come in the form of a female who's very beguiling, seductive, someone who's throwing, a lot of sort of energy around that is particularly attractive, almost like glue towards their prey. It is truly a predator-prey relationship, and these individuals, the issue is that the way that they're wired, they do not have sort of social feelings. They don't have social emotions that are abstract. So meaning like love, empathy, compassion, understanding what, liberty is, freedom, feeling joy, this whole spectrum of different feelings, feeling excited, feeling the coziness of sharing a cup of, hot chocolate or a chamomile tea on, a cold afternoon with a friend, just being able to cuddle up, curl up by a fire, light 7 candles and just have the room illuminated by natural light and just, kind of bask and just be in the presence, just to be, at one, and just to not be clamoring, not to be judging, not to be talking, not to be identifying with things you have to do or have done or will do, just to be in its pure, unadulterated, enlarged, evolved state. So that's very important for human balance, spiritually, psychologically, and physiologically. But when we talk about, someone who is female psychopathic, they don't have that same warm, female, nurturing, sort of, I want to take care of you, running around in, they're not playing that on the CD track in their mind. It ain't running there. That track, that tune, that is not running. But because it's very interesting because and brain scans have shown, other studies have shown a little bit more of what's going on in terms of the activity in the prefrontal cortex, in the amygdala, and the dopamine sensitivity, and oftentimes higher testosterone, which is the causative nature of this. So whether it's DNA, whether we're not discussing that. It's important to understand, though, for your own knowledge, to be informed, and what happens when you brush up against one of these people, or you're discovering that this could be a family member, or you've been in a relationship or are in a relationship with someone who kind of really has you in a bind, really has you sort of in this strange communication that most others don't engage in, or a very hyper-stimulated, hyper-aroused relationship. Oftentimes that is very pleasurable and tinged with explosiveness and fantasy, and this very seductive, and there can be the psychopathic gaze, which, it's a very seductive, it's not a wisdom, it's not a maternal, it's not a equal, it's this very seductive, and there's this energy that emanates from this individual. People emit energy. Thoughts are things, and you've got electrical currents running throughout your entire body. That's making your heart beat, making your legs move, making your body move. You have electrical currents, neurons that wire and fire together. Now, the female psychopath, their mindset does not really contain the emotions. It's kind of like a cup of chamomile tea without the chamomile tea inside, if you will. But and it's just how they are. Born, nurture, nature, whatever. Okay. Regardless of the fact, it's important to acknowledge that there are people like this and how they're going to encounter and come into your life, and then to protect yourself and understand how to see them coming, what are the red flags, and then how do you neutralize and how do you reset yourself, because psychologically it can be very, very depleting once you are involved or have been involved and are really, your life has changed tremendously and how you relate to life has changed tremendously as well. So the female psychopath will study, because they don't have this sort of, what you might consider, quintessential female characteristics, wanting to take care of other people, having a heart, wanting to, set up house, whatever, okay, the mother's role, cook, clean, whatever. We're not being stereotypical, but what we're attempting to explain to you is that a lot of these qualities are not vested in, it's not in that person. But because of this emptiness, it gives them this perspective that they can study others and they observe others and what others do socially, and they will mimic better than the source with which they are studying, because they are able to utilize these weaknesses, and the perception of situations and people and opportunities is much different and far remote than what most people would even think, contemplate, calculate, deliberate, and act upon and execute. So it's to understand that this is what's going on, but they're in the shell of a normal, oftentimes, can be very attractive, very revealing, very flirtatious, very flaunty of the physical senses, tossing the hair, bending. Oh, just, you know what I'm talking about. So, but there's something with the psychopathic gaze that's particularly attracting, and you can't really sort of think for oneself while you're interacting with them. They have this sort of engulfing energy. And a lot of men, particularly, interpret this as sexual attraction, and I am, falling for this person, I'm attracted to this person, and, want the real thing. And then they find that there's this beguiling nature. It's not just this fun person, but there's something else deeper going on, because they see sometimes the mask drop. But anyway, to understand the psychology is to understand that they will study, and very dispassionately, because they don't really experience that whole range of emotions, they will study very dispassionately what couples in love look like. What do they do? Why are they holding hands? Because this isn't, to hold hands, to be intimate, to hug, to give chocolate on Valentine's Day. This is not in their intrinsic nature, or, forgive me if that's a male, but, for a female, it's not intrinsic for them to give and provide and nurture the way that a normal, I don't want to say normal, but regularly functioning female would generally have the role, or just the physical composition to provide, the one who can listen, the one who, wants to communicate and will help with the emotions, and etc. So because they're empty of this and they mimic others, they will then put on a facade, a mask, a pretension of such. So, and it's really, it's usually so stealth-like that you don't think that this is, anything but the best. This woman is so seductive. She's so intelligent. She's so witty. And, she talks about this and she talks about that. And, we're making these plans and it's so wild and it's this fantasy. And it's just, you're on cloud 89. That is the love bombing, and that is the sort of grooming for sort of the engulfment, and then the pre-calculated idealization phase, devalue and discard. So the idealization phase of the female psychopath is when it seems to be like they're all in. Just all of a sudden, just, just out of nowhere, here comes this woman who's talking at your desk, who's knocking at your door, who wants to do this, who wants to bring you muffins, who wants to do, clean your house or write your paper or, curl up by the fire, at odd times of the day. And you're like, is this, the answer to my prayers? And, that is the idealization phase where they're finding out the weakness of the man with the intent of doing this. So it's a lot of intellectual work. It's not grounded in the heart, but it can appear as if. It appears as if this person is so lovely and they're going to organize this or throw this party or get this organized or start this whatever. And it's just like, it's an all, there's the issue with the idealization and the psychopath is there's this all of a sudden very intense all in feeling. And it's because they don't experience the emotions, they will mimic, and they will also then simultaneously discover the weak spots and then make sure that there is no weakness felt. So if you have, a feeling that your masculinity could be questioned, slapping you on the back at a guy, hey, will you carry this out? They will sense and then, show that you are, and have you to feel that you are all these things and then very satisfied as a result. It's a pleasurable, I'm the man feeling. But this very aspect then can come down to contention and is going to be devalued and discarded in an utmost cruel of manner that doesn't usually fit the spectrum of human emotions. It's not even on the range of, it's not even on the scale of 1 to 1,000. It's just some sort of other sub-zero, it's kind of inhuman. Hence, intra-species predator is the topic, is how Dr. Robert Hare describes. And I say that with seriousness, but also to inform and to help you to understand that this can occur, and it can occur to the most unsuspecting of people, to be targeted by a female psychopath, to work with, to be married to have in the family, to have in the neighborhood, etc. The issue with the mimicking is because they're gonna create this very sort of grand glue-like energy. In other words, the energy of the room seems to change. Sounds like you're talking about, Alliston, whoever, Jennifer. I'm just, what am I thinking? Angelina Jolie. The room of energy of the room changes. Jennifer Aniston. The world, energy of the room changes. For some reason, I can't think of her. I can't think of her name right now. Okay, it'll come to me in a moment. But just these people who you would think they would change the energy of the room. And she was in Hunger Games. I can't think of the name right now, but just these people who you would think would be very charismatic. So it's almost like that, where the energy and the vibe in the room changes, not just normally, but it tends to sort of metamorphosize. It sounds really strange, but there is just sort of this either putting at ease or titillation that seems to be attractive, and a lot of people just sort of want to jump the bandwagon on. They want to be part of this. They want to be part of it. They want to be included, the number one in this energy. And people do have energy. So there's this then feeling where then people then aren't really thinking for themselves. So their guard is dropped down, and then, because of the female psychopath, and because they are sort of high risk takers, doing things that most people would not. And it's not like, well, the successful, the thing that separates the successful from the people who don't succeed is the people who succeed are willing to do what the others failed or stopped at. It's more than that. It's not just that they work extra hard to get ahead or etc., things of that nature. We're talking about they do things that most people would be inhibited from because of the moral nature. They wouldn't do that. It's not right. It's not proper. It's not kosher. It's not cool. You're violating a law. You're violating a protocol. You're violating a social norm. You don't do that here. Not at work, not at the house, not at the party, not in a pub, not in a restaurant, not at a, it's just all these different things. And oftentimes it's in the way of the hyper arousal and the hypersexualization, really, of almost just about everything. So utilizing the nooks and crannies of the room to sort of fill, just and sort of always sort of position themselves so that they're I would say just well staged, whether they're, it's a very strange phenomenon, but it's so that all the attention in the room is sort of directed to them. And this is something that they do, again, to sort of ensnare and pull in those people who they can get into the idealized phase and get what they want. And the high risk behavior oftentimes is because they're not inhibited by the concern of such things. They're not inhibited or by such things as fear. They don't really experience that to the degree that most people do. Things that would make most people anxious. They're very cool, calm, and collected. They're sometimes very stunning in the way that they are fearless. And it's not just courageous, which means feeling fear and doing it anyway in the name of good, in the best interest of all. But they are fearless, meaning they literally aren't feeling fear, so they can just do things that most people would not be comfortable with. And then the people that they are targeting and then are then part of this game, are part of this development in the quote unquote relationship, but it's not a relationship at all. You just happen to be in proximity to them, because there's not really sort of a sort of human repertoire. I mean, they're human, but I mean, in terms of the emotional side, and they know this about themselves. They know this about themselves, but for them, it's a strength. For them, it's kind of like a superpower. For them, they feel that they have something that others don't, that allows them to get ahead, to get the job, to climb the corporate ladder, to have the string of boyfriends that they can just literally, rotate in without any sort of connection whatsoever. And most women would not have this sort of either way that they present themselves or degree and type of relationship, and then how it is conducted. So you have to be very strong to understand that they will do this, and then it's because then you don't see what's in the background. You're not seeing what's going on, outside. You're not seeing they're taking up all of your focus. That's how they will break people down. They will getting you excited when you should be focusing, getting you hyper aroused when you should be, getting something together and getting organized, and you need to be focused. Trying to take pictures or plan things when you should be sleeping, all these different things that will break people down and make them vulnerable, especially in the idealization phase. It's basically like they're all in right away, hook, line, and sinker. And so people, especially the men, they kind of lose track of either their goals or their values become sort of given up for this new experience with this very charismatic individual, which seems to be fearless and fun and everything they quote unquote would think their ego would want. But it becomes problematic because usually there's a very deliberate and calculated sort of taking the good from you. So all your good qualities, like we were talking about, that they are lacking, they are going to surround themselves with people so that they can then pick up this whole human repertoire of behaviors. In other words, what do men like? I see they're very responsive when they do this, or they're responsive when they do that. So they're studying people in order to use, manipulate, and exploit. It's a very serious topic, and I mean that's just a little gloss off the iceberg of what's going on. I mean, I could do hours of discussion on this topic, because there's so much that takes place, and it's very difficult to sort of extract yourself once you've gotten into that hyper aroused, and then which can become a very fearful or terrifying when you're sort of back down to earth and down to reality, which doesn't feel very pleasant anymore because you're so used to this hyper arousal of all these different neurochemicals and the bonding chemicals within you that aren't eventually get displaced. In other words, they don't fulfill that truth within. It doesn't fulfill a true relationship because there's things that you're not noticing when you're on that high with them. There's things that aren't noticed, about life, about your job, about your family, about your goals that don't get attended to. It puts up a big insulation, and it becomes a real tough wall to scale. But it's like you just keep scaling it, even though it becomes very dangerous. It becomes very slippery. You find yourself doing things that you ordinarily wouldn't do. This is not like me. This is out of my character. This is very strange, and they just seem to be moved by some invisible hand. It seems very esoteric, but we're talking about a subset of humanity, and they will create an engineered chaos, and they will go all the way to the top and try to say all the right things. They will, it's very unnatural, but they get away with it. So it is to understand that it's the sort of derailing from what is natural and organic and real in you, and it sort of flips it back where that you become undesirable to yourself, which is a very, very not pleasant situation. But that's the idealization, the devalue, and discard. So the end result is just a show of their power to them. See, that is sort of, if they do that, that's what is their fulfillment, even though it's meaningless, even though they have no attachment to people. They can be married and then be separated, and just, they might kick something, or they might just have a rage, and then it'll blow over, and then they'll just be like just carrying on with life again. It's very odd because there's no sort of emotional continuity. There's no emotional continuity. So if you've wondered why it's been this way, and you've looked at, well, maybe you've accepted it, and you thought that this was the desirable relationship. You thought that this was the perfect, this was the answer to the prayers. It's that all in right away experience, and not just like one of trust, but it's like one of super trust. I mean, it's like they just sort of put a bubble around you of like saran wrap that, all of a sudden you're like, that's just how they kind of take, it's like, I guess it's kind of like they just sort of, that's how they, I don't want to get too intense about it because it becomes then controversial and things of that nature, which I don't want to do. But it becomes very engulfing, and it causes people to think and feel things and perceive things quite differently, and it makes them feel that everything is connected to this person and that this person is unfolding this puzzle in their life, which is only owned by this psychopath, if you will. It sounds strange for someone who has not encountered this before. It might sound very odd. For people who have been targeted by this, they're going to say, I get it. And most other people don't get it. And so it's just to understand that you will be restored to yourself. It's important to understand that you don't feel that being at home within your own self is unpleasant or not the place to be. It might feel very alien, even though it will be restored. Your humanity will be restored, but this is how I perceive it, that alien feeling or being alienated, because they will alienate people from their family, their job, the pack, the group, and they'll literally physically push people away if it's going to be in the way of what they want. There's a real physical charge that comes with their charisma, and to the point where they can make people do strange things that are very out of character. And it's not just like I was impassioned, but it just seems very strange. I've used the example before. People who never smoke, they all of a sudden start smoking, and they realize they have to take a smoke break, and then the psychopath is over here with the other guy. There's this weird change of sort of drive. And if you want to share your experience or say I get it, you can comment down below. And you will understand that this is just part of this sort of psychological hijacking and sort of rewiring of their prey. And I'm using strong language like this, and it's not to say that they're animal-like or anything, but it's just to understand the dynamic of the relationship and to realize what role do you want to be in. Do you want to be in this situation? And don't be alarmed. Don't worry about it. If it's happened, this person, okay, I'm putting 2 and 2 together. Now I understand why they seem so cruel, mean, not in my best interest, not getting me, perpetuating. I mean, now maybe it'll start to make sense how the hyper arousal, it was creating all these different neurochemical reactions, and why you felt, just sort of taken over, or not able to sort of think for yourself or think, within your own body in a comfortable state. It's a hyper arousal beyond just stress. It's something different. So it's because, and there's also a tendency towards like the high risk behavior, which people might have, followed them into and such, which leads to a lot of trepidation and fear. And so oftentimes it's difficult to resolve that on your own because it was caused by this third party. And now you've got to reach closure and put things together when you're not used to thinking in that manner. But you can. You absolutely can, and it will be for the better. So you'll be at a better place. It's kind of like being on a land and then having a big, ocean just sort of with storms throw you all about and then throw you on a raft onto a better land than from which you came, because of the inner work that you do, and you kind of get a better sense of yourself. So what you thought was like a gap of time, you got to get through that hard stuff, that valley moments, and then eventually you'll get to the other side, and you'll have a lot of gratitude for safety and having the real thing, having real joy, having real truth, having real knowledge, knowing real people, and not having to play the game, the lie, the sort of really non sort of living fear that can take place when you're with these people. It's very difficult to identify the feeling. There's just, I don't know if there's any sort of word in the English language that can describe it, but that is essentially how, in that the people, because of this energy that is exuded, which is not empowering to others, oftentimes it's sort of vacuous to others, vampiric, if you will. It's it's difficult to understand when that you were being, sort of drawn in, and then how to realize that you've got as much strength on the other side to counterbalance it, so that you're not in like their reality, but you're in your reality, and that is what is respected, desired, supported, interacted with, and things like that. People oftentimes don't see it coming. They weren't aware of it, and you can be very intelligent, a business owner, have a family going, have a lot of accomplishments, a lot of achievements. Think that people, never had relationships issue. Oh, perfect. Perfect game target for this type of individual. So it's just like they, how they're taking things to them. It's just it's a consumption. And it has nothing to do personally, and they'll reflect back and they really won't have any hard feelings, but you're going to be the one with the hard feelings. And why didn't it work out when they're just, prancing along and doing, the next and the next. And, but the healing takes place when you realize that you don't desire that living that lie anymore, and that you're glad to have your feet on the ground and to have just yourself. And it's okay to just have that right now. Things will get so much better. Hang in there, and thank you for your question. This is your buddy. Peace and harmony with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out. Have a beautiful day. Be strong.